Well, hello there and welcome to the Creating Connections podcast, where I bring voices and perspectives from different people who are making a difference for children's learning and development. I'm Rachel Stewart and I'm passionate about connecting with people to share experiences and learn from each other how we can best support children to thrive. As founder and director of Practically Learning, I specialise in developing the capacity of parents and educators through personal development coaching and professional learning programs to build relational capital and trust to engage in effective partnerships. I'm endlessly curious about what is happening in our world today, especially in our schools, and how we can share good news stories and strategies for what is working and how to improve the lives of children in our world today and for the future. In this series of the podcast, we are exploring successful leaders in education, so you can learn from a diverse range of people what makes a successful leader and how you can take their learnings and apply them to your leadership. Today, I'm introducing you to an accomplished leader who currently works as science leader at Mater Christi College, based in Belgrave, Victoria, the heart of Wurundjeri country in Australia. Denise Raven began her career in HR, human resources, for the Community Pharmacy Friendly Society and moved into education as a learning specialist at Murrabart College in 2012. She then moved into a science faculty role as coordinator at Wesley College. Denise is passionate about increasing girls' participation and interest in science and is always actively seeking STEM opportunities for students, particularly in the ever-evolving job market where STEM careers represent the future. She is a member of the Science Teachers Association of Victoria and has recently been accepted into the Victorian Academy of Teaching and Leadership Teaching Excellence Program for 2024. Denise and I will share in conversation about her early career and how she moved into education to become a leader in science. So I would like you to welcome Denise to our conversation today. Well, welcome to the podcast. It's really great to have you here. I've already done an introduction, but it would be great just to hear your perspective of your journey. And I guess we'll just start with where it all began. Just a bit of history of yourself.
Yeah, look, I think my journey is probably very unconventional, and I came into teaching in a different way. For myself, if we go back to the beginning, my undergraduate degree was in applied science, with a sort of specialist area of horticulture, and I studied at an iconic institution known as Burnley. So very much in that sort of field, it's very well known and people hold tightly because we learnt such great skills. And for me, I had a love of the outdoors, I had a love of people, and I had a love of growing things. And my journey began there, and it came from someone really inspirational talking to my school. And, I connected and I felt that sort of ping of, oh, that's what I want to do. That's what I want to be. So I followed that hunch and it led me to there. And I met some beautiful lifelong friends and a community, and really just loved the style in which the lecturers and the teachers really sort of probably, engulfed learning and me and that experiential process. And I think that's where my love of education began. And from that, I was encouraged to head across and to really, share the things that I had learned. So I was very lucky in the early stages to go across to the University of California, across to Davis. And I presented a symposium where I shared my sort of final year findings, where it looked at how, horticulture and science can improve the self-concept of people. They can, improve, how they feel about themselves. And so from that, I really followed that passion and that interest, and came back and started working with people in horticulture. And that's where I started to get into that training and that education area. And I worked with disadvantaged youth and, in particular, teaching them skills, and I suppose teaching them to start a job, follow it through, and to complete a project. So I loved that hands-on approach. I was very lucky from there to start working in the Department of Human Services. And, this is where the unconventional, I suppose, component hops in. I worked in juvenile justice. And I found that to be an enriching experience because I really worked with students and, I suppose individuals who were so at risk, and it was great to see them grow and to mentor and to support them back onto a pathway. And even in that capacity there, I started to look after managing their educational needs and supporting them at TAFE. And from that, hopped into human resources, funnily enough. But I see a really direct link with that, with coaching and mentoring young people, building their capacity. And that was my role. I was very lucky to work with a pharmacy group. I looked after a lot of staff. And while I was doing that, I started to get back into teaching. And that's where there was a call for science educators to come back into the fold. And I was very, very lucky to get a scholarship to do that. So managing life, managing family, coming back in, doing my diploma of education, and really linking that love of science, that love of the outdoors, that love of people, and bringing it all together. And I found my home and my place in that educational arena. And very, very lucky to be placed at some great schools with some great mentors and people who encouraged me. So it was extremely unconventional, where I worked both in private practice, both for the government, and then coming back into the fold. So they say that if you're great with plants, and the earth, you have a connection to people as well too. You can grow them as well. So hold on tightly to that.
Yeah, well, wow, what a story. I think that I really love how you talked about how you were influenced by someone coming and talking with you at school about horticulture, and saw that as your calling, and that connection with plants and the earth, and how important that is to mental health and well-being, I suppose, and to
Oh, it
your
is.
and to the way that you connect with people. I really love that link. And I think that I'm not sure that we've really ever thought that much about how important that is, really, although a lot of schools now do have gardens where a lot of children, young people spend a lot of time, and it seems to be a way of supporting well-being. And I myself love to garden, and I find it very meditative.
Yeah.
Is that a
It
word?
is. It is. And I think that's how probably I find I enrich myself, that I do take the time out. And this may sound extremely unusual, but I do enjoy weeding. I find it therapeutic, but also
Yes.
rewarding too, as well, because you can go, oh, I've weeded that patch. It looks great now. Um, but I think, the outdoors and the garden and, growing something, is a beautiful thing. And I know even as a teacher and even on yard duty, when you're in your environment, you're walking around the school, students, they take solace in their place, outside of the classroom. And if you can provide a beautiful environment for them, they can only but thrive.
Yeah. Coming from growing up in the country, I absolutely appreciate spending time in nature. And it's great that schools are able to provide those environments for students, because a lot of students are not really living in areas where there are a lot of spaces for outdoor, play, I suppose, or opportunities for that. But we are so lucky to live in such a beautiful big country where there is so much bushland and places to go to, but not all families, of course, get to do those sorts of day trips and things like that. And I
Exactly.
suppose your work with the youth, and trying to support them to even finish projects, or to understand how to actually conduct themselves, I suppose, has led you into the role that you're in now.
Yeah, and definitely, I think along the way, it's all about coaching and mentoring and support, and I think that's, for me, like I come from a family of teachers, and possibly I should have landed in teaching earlier than I did, but I didn't. But I do really value the path I walked, because when I talk to students now, I can tell my story and I can share and say, like my path was different. I continually walked, I took a step of success, I changed direction a little bit, but it always led me to happiness, and it led me to the place where, I feel valued every day when I go to work. And, they see that it's not just a straight path, that you can walk in different ways, and learn different things along that pathway to get where you are today.
Yeah, it's really important for young people to recognize that it's not linear. Your pathway shifts and changes all the time, and different opportunities come up for you. And it's clear in your story that happened, and you were willing to take the risk to create your own changes. And
Definitely.
is that something that you also see you need to encourage in young people, is to be willing to take risks and to not worry or fear making mistakes?
Definitely. And look, I love the statement, you fail forward. You learn constantly more about yourself in everything that you do. And I think my, encouragement with students is all about, quietening those voices or those influences, and really looking and digging deep to what it is that, they need or they want, to follow the path, from that point. So it's a tricky one at times, but I think, students do appreciate that, if I can encourage them through my storytelling, that they can take a chance too. They can take that risk.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, since you've moved into teaching in science specifically, have you noticed a lot of changes in how science is being taught? And I suppose when we were at school, it was probably taught slightly differently. Have you noticed, or are you leading the way in how it's actually taught now?
Definitely. I know when I sort of moved, obviously, into the education field and coming back into schools, that's something that I experienced, that science was was probably a little bit more sort of like, it was held tightly into subject areas, into, biology, chemistry. It was very driven into sort of little strict, neat little boxes tied with neat little bows. And, it was possibly, when I first began teaching, it was similar to how I learnt at school. It was very linear. We had to learn this to move to this. And I noticed there wasn't a lot of sort of experiential learning, hands-on inquiry components. And that's something that I have really sort of held tightly onto and to embed in my teaching practice. And that is, creating an investigation where students, become the teachers. They become, the person that's directing their learning, asking questions, asking the why, and exploring. And I think it's really important to give students that. And, across my, teaching career, inquiry has been, probably the heart of everything I do, and making sure that the student sits at everything, at the center of everything that I do, to give them an experience, to give them a chance to problem solve, and to create questions. And that's taking a risk too in the classroom as well too, because you're not always sort of going down that traditional curriculum path. You're changing things, and you're, giving the student, I think, just an immersion, into science. I suppose my biggest thing is I want students to feel excited. I want them to come into my classroom and to have fun, to know that science isn't like learning another language. It's about, having fun. It's at the heart of, nearly everything that we do. Scientists, researchers, STEM professionals, they're at the core of a lot of things that are, revolve around us. And I want students to, experience the joy in that, and to see it potentially, as a match for them if that's their desire.
Yeah. What do you think the perception is still of science, in terms of encouraging more girls to go into the science field? Is there still an outdated perception of what science
It,
looks like?
There definitely is. And I know that, and I especially enjoy teaching year 7 science, because it's the students' first interaction with science. And it's really important for them to understand, a scientist can be them. It can be a young person. It can, be anybody, and I think that's really important to sort of, take away that sort of identity, belonging to any one individual or one gender, and, bring it back to, it's about you. And I work at an all-girls school now, and one of my, jobs is making sure that they understand is that they can be anyone they want to be. They can strive forward, and they've got their confidence to, just to be. And I think that's really important, and I've also worked at, mixed gendered schools as well too. And I think, it's really important to make sure that you're encouraging and you're giving, all students that opportunity, and, shifting perspectives. I think that's really important, but they're going to be faced with those, that gender inequality, certainly in science. But I know that those barriers are starting to break down.
Yeah. And just encouraging that curiosity to ask questions and really probe and really do the research and understand how they can be more curious.
Exactly. And I think that's our role as teachers. You're mentoring, you're coaching, you're giving them confidence, you're, encouraging them, and you're saying, yes, you are asking the right questions. I believe in you. Let's keep going forward, because that's what life's about. It's about just taking those steps. And if you can problem solve and build skills along the way, you know, that's the best you can be.
Yeah, I think one of the best things that people can learn is to be a problem solver, because you can apply that throughout your whole life, your personal and your professional life. I
Exactly.
just want to touch on just on the types of careers that are now, I suppose, appearing and evolving, and how science has become at what it has actually come to the forefront of careers in terms of being able to be problem solvers and creative and critical thinkers. How has STEM learning shifted that perception that we talked about before, and how has it inspired students to be investigators and to be, I suppose, have more passion for, moving into the science field?
Look, STEM's an unbelievably dynamic area to be a part of. And I'm very, very lucky that, part of my role at school is I get to, foster and to really embed STEM initiatives and STEM principles, within our school community. And it's really important, I think, to break down first and foremost some barriers around it's not always about technology. It's about those soft skills, building that opportunity for students to problem solve, to critically think, to initiate questions, to go off and do more research. And, that's part of my role, to make sure that, I present these opportunities for the students so they can understand, well, okay, STEM can be this, but it can also be this. It's so diverse. And, STEM can also be, a mix of, the arts and technology. And I think it's really important for me as an educator and leader in the school to make sure that I bring those creative opportunities, to the students. They don't know what they don't know. So bringing in as many, STEM professionals into the school environment, bringing in, projects or linking out in community, or even utilising our tech school, partnership. I think that's really, really important.
Yeah. And what are some of the initiatives that you've brought into your current role?
So I look after STEM, and across the year we have built an enrichment program for our Year 9 students. So 1 week across each term, they follow different enrichment areas, and one for this year, which is a new initiative, was looking at STEM. So for me, it was about building a program across that week that helped students to build an understanding and build a connection. I think STEM is not for everybody, and it's really important to acknowledge and to recognise that there are students who don't connect with science, who don't connect with that area. And what I wanted to do was to link in the design thinking skills, the problem solving skills, those soft skills that they could all benefit from. That's something that they can walk away with and they can use in everyday life. And then with those hidden vegetables, that secretly parents sort of sneak in, I had all the STEM components that, linked alongside of that. So for me, building an enrichment week was really important, where the students found joy in that, and they had what I call that happy noise. When they're completing the activities. So we did lots of different things. I had to really dig into what connected with our students. We've got students that love to do artistic creations. So we looked at even, creating some beautiful designs using tech such as the cricket, and then being able to look at some iron-on transfers. They made some beautiful bags. So they designed some beautiful jewelry, all using tech as they were, completing the tasks. We looked at enrichment activities where we linked in with animals at the zoo. We even immersed looking at, the museum to sort of finish off the week. So it was all about, building a change in perspective. Across the year too, we have a day we celebrate as a STEM Cup. We've got STEM captains at our school, which is great to see that the school's supporting the importance of, STEM focus. And across that day, I linked in with an amazing group called the STEM Superstars, and we had women come from industry, and students listened to their stories. And we created a beautiful magazine called Her Stories in STEM. And with that, students got to really connect with some mentors and build some links. And it was great to see we had women from all different fields. So initiatives like that, I think bring me a lot of joy. I really love to give students experiences that connect them out to community. And, the STEM Cup was a great way. We had beautiful escape rooms across the day. There was a buzz. The whole school was involved. And, captains were really proud of their achievements. So, that was just this year. But across my, career, I've had some, great other initiatives that I've been able to, infuse into schools as well.
It sounds like your job is always really creative too. You're just always working out ways to inspire the students even more to really get into science and into STEM. Have they been involved with the STEM MAD projects as well over time?
Look, definitely. I think there's been lots of different initiatives, and it's about just finding that sort of fit in the moment.
Yeah.
Our students are changing constantly, as individuals. But yeah, look, we love anything that, is STEM related, to have a look and to see if we can embed and, thread it through what we're doing at the school.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about how you integrate visible learning into your programs as well?
Yeah, look, I love visible learning. Part of my role as science domain leader, it's all about making sure we, develop ourselves as a team as well too. And this year we looked at visible thinking in the science classroom, and looked at, how we can foster those critical thinking skills, and, for us as teachers to appreciate the learning process that our students actually go through. It's a great way for us to really build our, formative assessment as well too of our students. So we actually focus that on as our professional learning this year. And, it was really valuable and very rich. And science lends itself to visible thinking in so many different ways. We're very blessed in science. It's very hands-on and very practical. But it's nice to be able to further that as well too, to look at the thinking that sits behind our learning. So it's a bit of a passion of mine as well too. And I do love the initiatives from Project Zero, and embedding them into my teaching practice is really important to me.
Can you share what visible thinking looks like?
Yeah, so to give you, I suppose, a really sort of nice activity that I ran in my year 11 biology class, we were looking at adaptations. And this is where I linked in my sort of horticulture and my plant knowledge. And quickly one morning, I just ran around. I'm very lucky to be on a big property. So I grabbed some beautiful specimens of what I would see as adaptations, that were really sort of visible for the students. I laid them around the classroom. So I had, banksias, eucalypts, grasses, acacias, the wattles. And with that, I really asked students, what could they see? What could they even feel, with the texture of the plants? And what could they even smell? So linking into all of their senses and then connecting that to, how would that benefit the plant? How would that, texture of the plant link into an adaptation? And, they really had to think about that. They, weren't given a script or they weren't given text to read. They had to go on their sort of their senses. And it was, really valuable because they had to connect the learning. They had to go, okay, well, this plant, I can see that the flowers are sort of, sitting more towards the internal stem. Does that mean that it's a little bit more protected from predators? So they had to start connecting all of that. Or, that leaf is quite furry, maybe that slows down, the wind, traveling across the top. Maybe that's, to help with water storage. So they started to sort of connect all of that. So it was a routine that involved obviously that sort of, a bit of, a prep with props, but it got them really thinking and connecting. And then from that, we sort of fleshed out more those adaptations in plants. But I think they really value that hands-on and having that experiential focus, first. So
Yeah.
it's an activity that could lend itself, either at the beginning, during, or after, where we have that sort of directed learning. So that's just one small activity.
Yeah.
But it's a really powerful one. And students value that because they remember that,
Yeah.
they remember the experience, the feeling.
And it takes them back to that, what you were talking about at the start. It's that connection between yourself and the plant and observing every element of the flower or the plants and really asking the questions about why is it designed that way, and how amazing is nature anyway to observe those things and having those opportunities. And
And
it
just
sounds,
taking the time too, I think, because sometimes you can say, well, what do you see? What do you truly see? And you have to sort of, it's fascinating to see what they see.
yeah,
I think that's what visible learning is about too. It's about identifying your students' thought process and their thinking.
yeah,
Sometimes we make assumptions as teachers and based on our personal experiences. And some students gave some feedback and I went, oh, yeah, I can see what you see. I didn't even see that. And I love that.
yeah, seeing things through different eyes. and
Definitely.
and in terms of uh yeah, being creative as a teacher and really thinking outside the box to create those experiences for students, how do you lead your teachers to become more
Oh,
creative and to be a bit more risk taking themselves so that they are leading examples for their students?
yeah, look, I think that's one of my strengths is creating experiences in the classroom and thinking outside of the box. And, encouraging your team. There are some people who are naturally creative, but there's some people who are not. And I think it's about that true sense of collaboration where you're helping, you're planning, you're brainstorming or share storming together, that you can pass on those wonderful ideas. And we have some great discussions where teachers might say, "Oh, what do you think?" or "What could you do here?" or "Oh, I think you could do this," and you start fleshing it out, and they go, "Oh yeah, that's a great idea," and then they go and they work with that. I think it's about having that opportunity to bounce off one another. And sometimes also it's about leading by example. It's about having a go and then saying, "I've tried this, it works really well. Would you like to have a go too?" Um, or it might be simple as, "I prepared this, here are my resources. You're more than welcome to borrow them," because we can be time poor as well too, and creating resources to go alongside the activity, that can be time consuming too.
Yeah.
So it's about, I think, having a really sort of open nature and, be willing to, share the ideas and to, encourage your team to, take risks, have a go, and then to congratulate and to really celebrate their wins as well too. I think that's really important.
Yeah, and to see the rewards that come from even those experiences and of watching the students and getting to know how they learn even more just by listening to their thought processes.
Definitely,
Yeah.
definitely.
So in terms of the future of science, and of course it's rapidly changing constantly, particularly in technology, how have you had to adapt, I suppose, to these new technologies that are coming through with artificial intelligence, and how are you leading your staff and your students around, I suppose, the benefits of AI, but also some of the challenges that we know are going to appear as well?
I think it's really important to embrace it and to integrate it where we can and to encourage students to use it ethically. I think that's really important. In science, we always talk about making sure experiments are fair and just. And I think it's important to look at biases that sit as well too with some of our AI tools. So I think it's really important to, know that students are going to be using those resources, but to talk them through how they can assist them and how then they can use it ethically, to be better informed. And, we're at that point where, I think AI is going to become more integrated into the classrooms. And this is where I think it's really important to make sure that you are well versed and that you use it yourself. I think that's really important because then you learn, I suppose, how your students are going to be using it too, in the
Yeah.
classroom. So I think being really upfront, honest, but encouraging them about the ethical use. I think that's very important because AI is biased in certain areas, in certain research fields. And I think, when they start to understand and they go, "Oh," and they sort of go, "Okay, well, I can use it to be informed, but I still have to do my own research. I still have to, certainly, you know, move forward with a range of resources, not just AI." But I do think it's a great tool for feedback as well too. I think that's really important that students can actually use it to improve their performance. So, I encourage that as well too.
Yeah, it's such an interesting space that we're moving into, and ethics are going to play a huge role, I suppose. I mean, already ethics in science, but
Mm.
also in terms of creating new technologies in the future, and using AI, and how that's going to expand into the medical field, and of course into horticultural and all different areas of
Yeah,
science.
definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. And look, I know, my focus is about the student that walks out the door at the end of my connection with them, when they move out from the school, what type of individual are they? And you hope that they're well informed and that they're able to make good, just, fair decisions. And I think that if we can give them as many opportunities as we can and expose them to, AI, I think that's really important.
Yeah. And how important do you think it is for parents to be engaged in their children's learning, particularly in helping them develop those non-cognitive skills, or I guess they're called soft skills. I call them essential skills of resilience and perseverance and all of those other skills that are needed when it comes to not only their education, but just the way that they conduct themselves as
Yeah.
people.
Look, I'm very blessed to have children, and I've had my daughter's just completed her first year of uni, and my son's moving into year 11. And having that opportunity firsthand to guide and to provide an environment for them to be successful. I think the connection for a parent is really important to be involved and to be aware, of their school environment and their school community and, what they're traveling through. But I also understand too that that's challenging too for parents, to build that connection when they're doing the best they can in a very busy environment where, students have to, manage and coordinate things for themselves. I think, it could have like two different results. I was very self-directed and very self-managed myself going through my school. And, I know one of my children is very much, self-directed, similar to I was, but then my other child needs more support and, more connection with their learning. So I think it's about giving your child what they need in the moment, but
Yeah.
leading by example to make sure that they see that I'm resilient. I start something, I follow it through, or I'm continually working to be better, to challenge myself, to stretch myself, to be my best. And, that's something I think is really important. I also, what I've really, really valued across supporting children in this space is giving them other experiences where they can draw skills and then apply them. Um, and a personal example would be my son. I've involved him in cadets, and having that opportunity, in a different environment has actually helped him to flourish and to acknowledge, my words of wisdom of, being resilient and being your best. It's not just coming from your school community or from your parents, it's also coming from other sources as well too. So I think it's about providing a full, I suppose, buffet of, opportunities that your child can pick from, that they learn different things. And it could be even just when they're able to get a part-time job, that beautiful learning happens,
Yeah,
then can
absolutely.
be applied. So I think school plays a really important role. Teachers play a really important role, teachers who connect with their students. That's what I think is really important. I can see that, when you connect and when you're able to be, that mentor and coach for them, I think, students can only flourish.
Yeah. And it's really important for parents to, yeah, understand that providing those extra opportunities to surround their children with good influences is actually helping their learning at school as well.
Oh, it's been, I think, highly valuable from, having a child who's, you know, who was in I suppose a COVID environment in those formative years, where, you know, didn't get the ideal sort of schooling environment, that I had to balance it and bulk it up with something else to, help him to flourish, and I've been really grateful for that too, so I can only encourage parents to seek out those sort of extra opportunities where it allows, because I know it's definitely hard to fit in as a mum, and as a dad too, coordinating extracurricular activities, but they're so valuable. They really are.
Yeah, especially part-time jobs too. I know my own son, he went through those first 3 years of schooling through COVID as well. And as soon as he got a part-time job, he just started to come out of his shell again, and he was
Yeah.
forced to speak to people again properly and learn
Yeah,
those
definitely.
skills. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And I guess parents tend to be a little less involved with secondary schools. How does the school engage them, I suppose, in community, but also having an awareness of what their children are actually learning, and how to actually support them through that process?
Look, there's obviously your obvious connections through your parent, support meetings across the year. But I think we have a very much an open door policy. I think it's really important to welcome, that connection and that, opportunity to talk whenever possible. Because I think when you have that beautiful link with parents, you can support those children and you actually get to know them a bit more, because we only see them at school.
Yeah.
We can have an assumption of certainly what their world is outside of school. But when you have that parent, joining you on that journey, I think that's a great opportunity to form that partnership to support. And I think I also know when students know that you're connecting with your parents as well too, they feel really supported as well too. They're very much, going, oh, you care, you want me to be my best, and I think it's really important that you connect with your community and you connect with the families to say, I'm here, you know, however, and I'm a home group mentor as well too. So, across the schools, a port of call every morning to touch base with the students, to see how they're traveling and how they're feeling. I think that's really important. And then, you're able to, touch base or make referrals or, make sure that, students feel really supported, through their journey. They spend a lot of time at school. They
Yeah.
do. And it's really important for them to be seen, I think, and to know that, there is someone there who cares about their whole person. I think that's important about, it's not just about the academics, it's about, their well-being, it's about, their social connections as well too at school, just to make sure that they're thriving as best they can.
Yeah.
And
So
we have different things across, the year, but I think, whether it be, information evenings or, subject selection or tertiary or, celebrating achievements. And I can only encourage parents to sort of be involved as much as they can.
yeah, and take the opportunity to be involved when the invitations are there as well.
Definitely.
Mm.
Definitely.
So, in terms of aspiring leaders in education, what advice would you give to people who are considering teaching as a profession, similar journey to you where they've come from other industries and considering moving into teaching? What sort of advice would you give in terms of taking that leap?
I think you have to be aware that teaching is not about direct instruction about your area of expertise or your area of passion. It's about managing the whole person in the classroom and having the empathy and the ability and the awareness to be able to support them in a way that, they're achieving their best. And I think, teaching is not for everybody. It's a balance, it's a juggling act, and there is a lot of work that sits behind the scenes. But if you have a passion for coaching, for mentoring, for growing an individual, teaching is for you. And I think it's a juggling act at times. So being organised, being committed and driven, and I think creativity plays a big part as well too, or being a part of a team where you can source that from somewhere else. Because I know that the student that we possibly know ourselves to be is different to the student that you teach in the classroom. Students are evolving, they're changing, and you have to be flexible and adaptable to, be the teacher that they need. And I think you have to have that intuitive, ness to you as well. It's something that is, I know, like I really value, because when I connect or I see past students, you can see that the value that you have brought to their life. And I think, we are blessed to be in a career that, that you can change people's impression of themselves, or you can encourage them to go a particular path. You can be inspiring for them. And I really love that. I think it's a really, really special opportunity, and it's super enriching.
Yeah, to have the opportunity to impact people's lives and see them grow into amazing adults and who end up pursuing the career that I guess you've contributed to in some way.
Definitely. And even if they don't choose, like I would love for everyone to look at science. I always say science is not for everybody, but as long as you enjoy my class, that makes me happy. I want you to have fun.
Yes.
I want you to
Enjoy
um,
learning.
enjoy the learning that sits within the classroom. So that's the inner outcome that makes me really happy.
How important do you think it is for teachers to understand a little bit more about neuroscience and how the brain works and how students actually learn?
I think it's integral. I think it's really important. Neuroscience or neuropedagogy, it's really important to understand how your mind works, because then we can link in and help the best we can. I think that's really important. It's about knowing your subject, and if we look at learning, that's where learning begins. It begins in our mind, essentially. So it's really important to understand that and to link in with that. And I think, neuroscience links into well-being, into emotions as well too, and it's really important to have that holistic approach and to understanding well-being as well too. It's so interconnected, it's something where our students are changing, and I think it's really important to be up to date with that, and know to look at, and even a simple thing of, I can watch the students look at social media and how they scroll through things. It's very intermittent. It's very fast paced. I can go to an event and even the DJs don't even play a full song anymore. It's like little snippets,
Yes.
it's like the best of. And students now are becoming conditioned to that environment, so how we teach or how we introduce concepts, and even if you look at a concept like interleaving, like you might teach a concept, leave it, then come back another way, bring it back in, teach it again, and that's linking in with what they're experiencing and what they've been exposed to, and it embeds in a better way. So I think it's really important.
That's fascinating. And how the brain's actually processing that information in short bursts,
Definitely. Yeah,
and how that's impacting, your teaching of them, because the attention span is reduced
it
to,
is. And
to
I
a point.
think there's lots of conditioning out there in their environment that is, fostering that outcome.
Very interesting space. I think the whole study of the brain and what we're learning is just so fascinating to me. And I think that, yeah, in some ways, social media is a bit of a social experiment in how it is changing our brains and how we respond and how we interact with information.
It is. And I love the McCrindle report that comes out that gives the
Yes.
information. And I really find that refreshing. And I think it's really important to constantly remind myself as well too, as to what the data and what the information is giving us back as teachers to be informed, because we can certainly fall into, when I was young, this is how we did it, or when I was at school, this is how we learnt best, but it's very different now, you
Yeah.
know?
So, in terms of the future of education, it really needs to be extremely adaptable. Is it being adaptable to the students themselves, or is it being adaptable to the environment that they are living in now? And I
Look,
suppose in some ways you can't predict the future, but moving towards a different future where jobs are changing all the time and careers are not so linear like they used to be.
definitely. And also too, the environments are very different as well too for the workplace. Um, I recently took our students we did an immersion with an industry with a STEM focused. and taking them into the workplace and even looking at the environment that they were working in and how they sort of created different working environments. And it was very different to what I thought it would be. And it's this new age. It's completely different, like landscape to what I would have been exposed to. But it's adapting and looking at, social media, how things can change really quickly, the different generations needing different things or being exposed to different environments, and then how to get the best out of that. And I think when I'm teaching, I like to consider that. I think that's really important. But I do hold on really tightly to core values, and that is, respect, honesty, grit, giving students, that opportunity to stick with something and the value of that and resilience. I think those sort of true elements sort of will carry you no matter what. Even though the environment's fast paced or ever changing, I think they still have to have that, bedded down in that foundation.
Yeah. In a lot of ways, we've had to learn how to adapt to change very quickly
Definitely.
in all aspects of our lives now. And young people obviously are growing up in that environment. So they're not, some are coping quite well with change and others are not. And how do you support your students to have that mindset, that grit mindset?
I think it's all important. Look, science is great. It lends itself really well to that because we talk about, reliability and making sure that we complete our experiments, not just once, but we have to do it again and again and again because we have to really value the output and know that, we've got a good sort of, you know, good subject base that we've looked at. And so they understand that because as we're doing it and their experience it, they value and go, oh, he's an outlier. That's an issue. This is why we repeat things. So I think the science helps with that definitely because they are able to see that with their data and their results. It's proof for them. So I really value science in that way. And, I think it's really important, when you're giving students feedback, when they're improving on their work as well too, that, and you're honest with them too. I think it's really important to say, well, look, this is not ideally up to standard. You need to look at this, and this, and the value of not just handing something in by the due date, but by working on it beforehand. So I spent a lot of time with my students on those life skills, and they're transferable across any subject, but it's about taking pride in what you do and being your best. And that might mean having that grit mentality where you do it a few times, not just once, but we do it a few times to improve and to be better.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's been really interesting conversation today. Was there anything else that you would like to share before we finish up the
No,
interview?
look, I think we've had a great chat and I think we've covered lots of different areas. And, I really sort of value, and I think if we look at, if I could inspire anybody to step outside of their comfort zone, connect with community, connect with, things that sit with outside of your classroom and bring them back into your students. I think the more experiences and opportunities you can show your students, and by really connecting them to your passion, I think, for learning and for stretching yourself, I think that actually sets a really beautiful example for your students. I think, I'm a strong believer. And if we look at leadership, you've got to lead by example and you've got to be willing to do everything. That even, you want your students to be able to see that. I think that's really important because, you want them to take those risks. You want them to have a go.
Yeah.
We're not perfect. We fail forward, but we learn together. So I think that's so important.
Yeah. And we sometimes forget that young people are always watching us and
They
learning
are
from us. And even though they don't even realize it themselves, they are actually watching and learning.
definitely.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time today. It's been really interesting and I've loved hearing your story and your journey and how you're inspiring so many young people to move into the sciences and be creative and be critical thinkers. And it sounds like all your students would love being in your class. Sounds like
Thank
science is
you.
fun these days.
Oh, it is. It is. That's my goal, because
Yeah,
I think when you love something, you learn along the way. But
yeah,
I think it's so important.
yeah. Well, thank you for your inspiring story today.
You're welcome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, what another inspiring interview in our Leadership in Education series of our Creating Connections podcast. If you enjoyed this interview and would like to learn more from other leaders in education, please click on the subscribe button to receive further podcasts on your feed. If you'd like to be a guest on our podcast, click on the link below to book a meeting with me to learn more about you and your leadership in education. Or if you're listening to this podcast, send an email to rachel@practicallylearning.com.au to express your interest in being on the podcast. If you are a school leader or teacher with aspirations for leadership, but you're challenged with self-doubt, overwhelm, and whether you have what it takes to take that next step, our Connect with Your Mind Mastery Coaching Program can support you to work on your own self-mastery to become the leader you aspire to be. For further information about our coaching and professional learning programs, please visit our website at practicallylearning.com.au or click on one of the links below and visit our podcast for our future series of interviews to support you as the adults who are guiding children on their learning journey. I do hope you enjoy the rest of our episodes on our Creating Connections podcast, and I hope to meet you soon.